Hello, my name is Jay Jacobs. I'm going to put together the screencast for you so you can see how we can treat some of the data in a VERIS format and in the JSON format and things we can do with it. We're going to be working with the Mongo database, which is a open source tool, or free to download anyway, and you can download and install that on anything. I'm running this on a Linux machine here. So the first thing we want to do is load it in. I know Kevin Thompson had done that before using Python, which is it's the fastest method, probably the easiest actually in the long run. But there's a command line tool that we can do this as well. So I've got this data directory that has these files in it. So what I want to do is loop through those files, data JSON. So just the JSON directory, the JSON files in that directory, and then I want to do a Mongo import, and I'm going to do create a database called VERIS and a collection called public, and then I'm going to pass in a JSON array command with the file name, and then I'm going to put all of that out to devnull. So this is running, being rather slow. As you can see, this is just 1200 incidents. As we get more, obviously this will be much slower. Kind of thing where you probably have to go get a cup of coffee or something when this is running. When this is done, we're going to go into the command line, and then we're going to use the command line tool, just Mongo at the command line, and just go look at some of the things that we can do at the command line just to inspect the data. So this is back now. If we go into Mongo, just the command line tool, and we say use VERIS, the VERIS database. Now we can do db public collection. Let's just count. Let's just see. So we've got 1,218 documents, as they're called in Mongo, documents loaded up, which are incidents, JSON files. So we've got 1,218. Let's go back out of here, and let's just take a look at OSINT 100. If we go to action, so this has social actions with a target of partner. We'll remember that. And so if we do go back into Mongo, use VERIS again, now we can do db public find, and now we want to look for everything where the action social target is partner. And we want to, let's just count, see how many records there are. So we've got one, so that means that we can just take that count off, and we can see the JSON document now. Here's the whole JSON document of that particular incident. Now another thing we can do here is put a qualifier after our filter. That's a filter there looking for just the target of partner. Let's filter off just action social by saying just action social is true. Now when we run this, we're just going to get back the action social. So we can do that. We can do that with anything in that JSON file. We can do it with the actor. You see we've got an external actor there with a motive of financial. We can do it with the victim. You can see here we've got NeuroCare Incorporated in the US and Georgia. And the industry here, we'll come across this later, the industry here, 62111, it's something in the healthcare, and we're using the NAICS code, which is a North American Industry Classification System. And so 6.2 represents all healthcare, 6.2.1 is like ambulatory healthcare or something like that. And then 6.2.1.1.1 is a very specific breakdown of the industry. But at the high level, we can pull out anything we want here. So let's get out of here. Now, one thing that we can do is leverage the Mongo aggregation framework, and that's something you can Google for. There's some really good documentation online at the Mongo website. But what we're going to do is just create a file here called screen.js. And so the first thing you want to do is create a uniquely called variable called foo, and we're going to run the aggregation framework. So we're going to say within a DB, call the public collection and an aggregate function. Then we're going to open it up for a list, and we're going to do a couple of things here. First thing we want to do is match out, filter out something. So we only want to match things that we know are confirmed data loss event. And so we look for the variable attribute confidentiality data disclosure. where that is set to yes. And then let's just do a count. So we're going to do a group. Let's set the ID to null, and then we want to create a variable called n, and we're going to set that to the sum of the number of records, which is just a true for the sum here, and close that out and close that command out. And now within we've got this variable called foo, which is JSON output from the aggregate command. So now we can just call a JavaScript command called print JSON on that variable. So if we run this, what we're going to see, we're going to get back essentially one JSON record that's going to have ID set to null and n set to the number of records that have data disclosure set to yes. So if we run this, we're going to run Mongo, the command line. Essentially, we're just going to feed that in at the command line. If you wanted to, you could type all that aggregation stuff in the command line here in the Mongo tool, or it's easier, I think, to create a file and just use that file. So we're going to run on localhost against the default port, against the VERIS database, and we want to run screen.js. So if this worked, and it did, we've got the result back with 557 records. Now you can see this is a JSON object, a JavaScript object here. So we could even call, the result, and then we've got this array. So we'd look for the first element in there, which is this block, and then we can pull out the ID or the n. So if we go back into this and we take that out, but we print foo result, the first entry in there, and the n. And so what we end up with is printing the result, the first entry, and the n variable within that. And when we run this again, we should just see 557 after that title stuff. So that's pulling out the specific n value up here, 557, just printing out that specific value. So we're going to go back to printing just the JSON, comment that out. So now in here, let's say we want to look at the number of victims, focus on the number of victims within healthcare. So the first thing, because victim is an array in the VERIS data, and we want to count by victim, we have to unwind that array. And what that does, so if we have one breach with 2 victims, and what it'll do when it unwinds that, it'll create, rather than one document with 2 victims, it'll create 2 documents with each victim in one of the 2. So the first victim will go in the first one, and the second victim will go in the second one. So you can expand out, you saw that we had 1,218 incidents. When we unwind the victim, we're going to get about 1,300. I just know that I've done that before. So we're going to get about 1,300 incidents because we're looking at a per victim now. And so if you're counting, how many breaches occurred in an industry, you may not want to double count the breach by unwinding the victim. So you just have to be aware that unwind will create more records. It duplicates that out. So we're going to call unwind on, what are we doing here? Victim. So we want to unwind victim. And actually that's irrelevant. So we just want to unwind on the victim. And then we want to do another match where we are just pulling out the victim industry, and we want to do a regex here, a regular expression, because we just want to match anything that begins with 6.2. So 6.2 is healthcare. And so we want to do an options of I and close these out. So what this is going to do, it's going to match that victim industry that begins with 6.2. So anything within that healthcare industry is now going to be matched out. Everything else will not be in the final JSON. So then we're going to count that. So if we run this again, same command, we're going to get now the n of 121. So now we've got 121 incidents in here. So if we go back in, let's say we want to just look at specific enumeration. So rather than this null, let's set this to action error variety. Okay, so now we're going to set that ID to that error variety. And now that's a array as well. So if we had more than one thing in there, it's gonna loop it all together. So you can see we've got several things coming up here. First, it's an array. So we've got this ID of an array. So if we had some of these with multiple error varieties, like a publishing error and disposal error, we would see publishing error, disposal error counted in there. But we can see, like, for example, with publishing error, there were 5 of these with publishing error. 8 had disposal error, 6 had missed delivery, 89 are empty or null, meaning that the field isn't even there at all. So one thing we could do here is we could do match where action error variety, and we're going to say where action error variety exists. Okay, and now if we do this, now we no longer have that null in there. And what else we want to do is, after we group this, we want to project it into, actually before we project, I'm going to save that. I'm going to unwind on the action error variety. So I copied that line, action error variety. So I'm going to unwind on action error variety. So now that array should be gone. So when I do this, it's a much simpler output. The array isn't there. Now remember, if there were multiple in here, like a publishing error and disposal error in the same incident, it would copy that incident twice. So we'd see publishing error would have one more, and disposal error would have one more, and it'd be independent in here. So this is how that's looking with just that. Now if we wanted to take that ID out, what we can do is do a project here at the end, make it nice and neat. So we could say we want to not show that ID, but instead we want to show a variable called error, which we're going to then map or project to the ID dot to just ID in this case. And then n we'll just want to show as is. Put a comma up on there. So now when I run this, I get an error about exception expression not allowed. So I didn't have to put a $sign on that ID. That's what that's saying. Embarrassing. So what I want to do, project ID error. So this one does need a $sign. Okay. So what this is doing now, it's just a prettier way to show it. It doesn't have that underscore ID anymore. And you can see we've got the same result, and we've got this square bracket here. So at this point, we could even convert this to like a CSV. So if I go back in here, at the end here, I can go in and say, do a for statement. So if I do for variable I started at 0, and we want I to be less than foo result length, and then just auto increment that. What that is going to do is loop through the result array. And so now what we could do is just we could do a print foo. This is going to be a pain to type. I with error is the name of the variable. And let's put a comma in there and concatenate these together. The foo result I and n. So what we have now is we're printing this out. So rather than printing the JSON, which I can comment out, now we're going to loop the array and actually print the error variety, comma, count. So this should be a really clean thing. So this, if I didn't have a typo in there, line 14, where did I screw up? Right there. So so this just prints out CSV then. So we could take this type of thing, save it off to a CSV, and load this into Excel or something, which isn't, this is pretty simple, this type of data, but it can get more complicated. So for example, if we wanted to pull out the organizational size here as well, which is a victim.employee count, what we could do is rather than go right to a group, we could project something into, let's call it bar, and let's set error to action error variety, and then let's set org size, don't need a quote, org size to victim.employee count. And so this is going to, I need one more here. There. So what this is going to do, it's going to project into a bar value, error, and org size, and then that becomes our entire JSON. Everything else part of that incident is now gone. So when we do this grouping now, rather than action, error, variety, we want to do bar, and then this error would become error, because that's what we mapped it up to above. And then we've got another variable here of org size, which we're just going to call org and map that to id.org size. So we're going to project into bar the error variable and the org size, and then we're going to group and count how many repeated things we have, and then we're going to project out error, org size, and now in here we could just do this and do another, let's do this. So we're going to, instead of n, we want to do org, which is what we did, and then put a comma and concatenate now with n. So now we're going to loop through each record, print out the error, a comma, the org, comma, and then the count. Assuming I didn't screw up anything like that. So here I've got two closing parentheses, and here I've got, I didn't put a $sign here. So once you get out the little things here, there's an amazing amount of mistakes. I don't know where that came from. All right, so here, sorry about that. Here is the output from that. So you can see we've got the error of other with org size of unknown. Publishing error is 101 to 100. So we could group by publishing error. We've got 1 at 100 to 1,000, 2 at 10,000 to 2,500. Here's 2 unknown, and that's all the publishing errors. So we could take this data now and load this into Excel. We could save this off as a CSV and load it right into Excel. And that's all I wanted to show. Amazing 17 minutes into it. Thank you for watching.